need to build a database that will be used to manage donor funding projects in Liberia. But before then, there was a system that we had called the Aid Management Platform. But there was an issue with the Aid Management Platform for which we couldn't get data. We had certain bugs that we damaged all of our data, and at a certain point in time, we just lost all of the data. So because of that, there was a need to build a new system. And so in 2019, we were told to consult a developer to help us build this system that we use to manage all of our projects. And so the developer that was consulted was called Mark Prof. So Mark developed the system that we use today called the Liberia Projects Dashboard. So why was that planned? Now, it happened because of the aid and NGO policy. There was a policy that we developed which was used to guide the government and the donor partners on how to manage aid in Liberia. So based on that,
it's on the right-hand side, but maybe just takes a moment now. Okay. Oh yeah, we can see it.
Based on the policy that was developed, we decided to do this platform. So this platform, like I said, was developed by Imagine Tele, which is Mark, and that we use today to manage all of our projects.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's some things that it seems like some bugs in the PowerPoint. Yeah, you have to be careful with the cable. Yeah, so this is me, and actually it's now us. We have a second developer now working with in Liberia. The aim is to start working with other developers also based in the country or region of the countries that we're working with and that we're working for. And I think for me, what I've always really enjoyed doing is working with civil servants directly, understanding their needs, their frustrations, their ambitions, and also how we can support them in kind of fulfilling their business needs and their jobs. I've worked also with civil servants, policymakers, development partners, as well as NGOs over the years as well. The aim is to really focus on the development effectiveness challenges that each country has, with a preference for long-term engagements rather than, short-off, one-off quick wins and stuff. The idea is to really, for me, it's also satisfying to see progress over time. We see software development and data management as tools. And so the starting point is really the problem, rather than seeing the piece of software as a, way to kind of fix everything. And yeah, finally, I said this already, we work with developers in the country. So today we're going to talk about three things, and Nathan and I are going to do a bit of a tag team on the presentation. So we're going to focus first on data collection, that it's challenging, but it's really important as well. Secondly, how we're trying to simplify this using the project dashboard and IATI. And finally, then we're turning attention back to development effectiveness as well, because we've unlocked, a lot of additional time that we're saving through simplifying data collection. There's one point I think we made, like it made on our previous slide, but we didn't emphasize it. Just to say, we've been thinking a lot about sustainability of the platform over the last 6 to 12 months as well. We're currently funded by the Swedish government, which is great, but we need to think a little bit about the medium and long term as well. So as part of the sustainability efforts, this is why we've created this company, to make it possible to work with other countries as well. And we're really interested to see if there are other countries that would like to share this piece of software and share the approach as well. And that includes obviously both Anglophone and the Francophone countries as well. Of course, also Hispanophone and Lusophone countries, I'm afraid I didn't have the ability or time to translate things into Spanish and Portuguese yet, but happy to talk.
Okay, so examples of data capture by Liberia. So when we are capturing data, these are the basic information we capture from the projects. Then the first information we capture is basically the project name. And then next thing is the project description, the objectives of the project, the start and end date of the project. And then we'll come to the MTF projection. So MDAP projection is a 3 years projection I would normally request from the development partners. Then the next information we also capture from the project is the project cost. The next one is the project code. Now the project code is very important because it's the project code that we use to normally connect from IRT to the Liberia project dashboard. So the next thing we also capture is the disbursement information. Then we also come to the implementing organization. What implementing agency is managing this particular project? Then the last thing we also do is the alignment with SDG. So we also face difficulties in getting these projects. Now, if you look at the system that we have there 497 ongoing projects in our system. So we got almost like 1,000 plus. The 1,000 plus include both on and ongoing and completed projects, sorry. So for the ongoing projects, we have like 497. And if you check in our system, we also have like 32 development partners. So there are challenges that we face. There are two challenges, one from the government side and one also from the development partner side. Now for the government side, the challenge we face is reconciling the data that we collect from the development partners, how to reconcile them with what we also have in our system. That's one challenge that we face. The other challenge is from the development partner. Now, development partners have a whole lot of different systems that they collect their information from. If we request them for information, it takes a very long time to get this information because of the different systems that they have. So these are the two challenges that we face, government and the development partners.
Should I just go?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I thought it was kind of useful to touch on this, and it's kind of a bit of an elephant in the room when we're talking about these systems, right? That many of the systems that have been created around the world, the experience is a bit patchy. There was a 2017 study from this guy who I think was at the LSE in London, who found that among 75 installations of AIMS around the world, only 12 are active in the sense that they've been updated at least once in the last 6 months. 27 are online, but without currently updated data, and 32 are no longer online. So this isn't a great success story for these systems, right? And so I think it's really important when we're thinking about, what sort of systems we need or we're trying to build, what kind of lessons do we need to think about and learn from this big experience that we have in previous years? And what do we need to do differently? I mean, actually, as Nathan said, we did one of these systems was one of the systems that existed in Liberia as well. And we did spend a lot of time trying to work with this system and trying to get it working. We also spent a lot of time working in Excel. And Excel, my perspective is generally, if Excel is good enough for you, stay with Excel because you can do a lot in Excel. It's very flexible. It's great. But at some point, maybe you want to switch to a system as well. So it's funny that the heading, maybe does it, maybe it's like a bug or something. Okay. Yeah, there's maybe some bug with the PowerPoint that it's showing sometimes the content, but not the header. Anyway, we've got it there now. So what are some of the lessons that we can learn from this experience? And I think this is partly from looking at these different systems, but it's also really from the experience of Liberia trying to, look at using this AMP, the previous system, and then developing this new system over the course of the last, I think we said 4 years, no? It's been a process, So systems definitely require user-friendly data entry and reporting tools. And this is what I mean by when I say working with civil servants and technicians to understand what they're actually trying to do with getting the data into the system. Because if your deputy minister or your minister is asking you to do a whole lot of work and get information into the system, as much as you may want to try to satisfy their demand, at some point it's going to be tough if the system is not helping you, right? Secondly, you need to have some clear summary views of the data by development partner, by sector, this kind of thing. It needs to be simple to use without frequent training. And this is a problem that we've seen in lots of systems in the past. They're quite difficult to use. They're quite technical. AID itself is complicated, right? But we shouldn't be making the system then even more complicated than AID already is. We should be trying to make it a bit simpler. And in the sense that, you don't need training to use Gmail or Facebook, you shouldn't need training to use one of these systems either. So simple to use without frequent training. last couple of things. So the data also really needs to be the data that's required for country processes. So we've heard, a number of these different processes that are important today. I think Edward was also talking about the importance of using it for budgeting and this kind of thing as well. We need to have data in the system that's actually useful for budgeting and planning purposes, because these are some of the main issues that are needed in different countries. But the really important thing is essentially the system has to be useful and it has to be user-friendly. It has to be okay. The cost of using it has to be low enough in terms of the ongoing, work to kind of keep the system up to date, and the benefits have to be high. And if we get those kinds of things in place, we're going to be on a good track in terms of sustainability, because people are going to want to, keep a system going if it's actually serving their needs. So yeah, I think this slide. Yeah. So Sarah talked a thing in the previous session. Yeah, I'm kind of losing my mind. 2 sessions ago, sorry, yeah, it's been a long few days already, about the country development finance data tool. And so I worked with Sarah to build this tool as well for ATIA on the software development side. And I think, again, of course, everyone can make up their mind on this, but I think this is a big step forward already in terms of a number of those things that we identified on the previous slide as challenges in terms of many of the systems we've seen before. So you can see these kind of summary visualizations. You have customized dashboards, so you can play with the data however you need to. And the files are formatted according to the needs of government. So it's actually responding to what people want to try to do with the data. So then the question is, well, do we need a system at all then? And my answer is, I think so, yes. Maybe the next slide. It's funny. Oh yeah, it's like, okay, cool. Thank you. So I think there's kind of 4 main areas, and maybe other people have different ideas, and whether these are things that every country needs. But I think there's generally 4 main ways in which 4 main reasons why you would need to have a country system, and you couldn't just use the country development finance data tool, click export, and send the data off. Firstly, in terms of data collection, so we've heard a lot, the last days about IATI data quality. I think we've made a massive improvement really in the last few years, and I think that's reflected in the tools as well. The tools, the data now starts to make some sense. But we know that with a number of development partners, we still have partial publication. So, for example, we've seen with USAID, there's no budgets. There are some budgets, but there's very little at the moment. We've seen with other development partners, there are other things missing. And from some development partners, maybe we have some results, and from others we don't. So we need to supplement this data that we're getting from IATI with manually collected data at the country level often. We've got issues with non-publication, so where certain development partners are not publishing to IATI at all. So this could be India, China. In Liberia, it's the case with lots of the Arab donors, for example, that we're missing their data in IATI, so we need to collect that manually as well. And it's also really important to validate the data with development partners as well. So as we're going through this process at the moment, even of using IATI data, we're checking with each development partner to see whether the data that's published in IATI is actually, sensible, whether they think this reflects what they're actually doing. It's taking time, we're going step by step, but we're making progress also on this. And I think it's really important. You've got to handle issues around curation of data. So you want to make sure that the data in the system makes sense in a bunch of different ways. Overcoming double counting, where you have different organizations involved. You want to contextualize the data, so using local budget classifications that you can then integrate the data later into the budget process. And of course, then you might have different needs in terms of functionalities, types of projects, stuff like this. And finally, policy questions. Different countries have different rules in terms of what should be counted as aid and what should be included. So some countries only want to capture aid to the public sector. Other countries want to exclude administrative costs. And those are the sort of rules and choices that you might want to make in a country system as well. And the main thing is, essentially, you need to respond to the specific needs of each country. And while a tool like CDFD, Sarah and I working together made a lot of effort to make the system as useful as possible, there comes a point when you're limited in terms of what you can do to across the board in a way that doesn't kind of obscure the needs of specific countries as well, I think. So that's all how it's tricky to get data, but we kind of need it as well, right? We need to do this.
So the Liberia project dashboard is like this. This is how it appears. How do you log on to this? To log on to this, we follow this particular address we have on here, liberiaprojects.org. Now, you don't need to have administrative right or any kind of right before you log on. You just log on with that particular address and then it's open to you. So the system is open to the public that anybody from any part of this world can view whatever is in it. Now, the system was developed from here before you do the live view, right? Yeah. Okay. So the system was developed in 2019 for the government of Liberia. It was made public in December 2020. Since 2021, we've been using this particular system and linking projects with IRT. So the development of this particular Liberia project dashboard was financed by Sweden. And so since the development of this particular system, there has been continuous development to the system. So we're going to do a live preview of this particular system so you see how it works with the linking of projects from the system to IRT. Okay, so this is the Liberia project dashboard. Now, how do we link projects from the Liberia project dashboard with IRT? Now, the first thing we do, like I said, we use the project ID to link with IRT. So the first thing we're going to do is to get the particular project. So we're going to be using that particular project of the Youth Rising project from EU. So we click on the project. So if we click on the project, we go and click on the edit button. So if you look up there, you see the project ID 2018 399 blah blah. So we're going to copy that particular code. So if you copy the code, you come here and click on connect. And then you paste the code in there. It's already there. So you come and click on search. So once you click on search, if that particular project is in IRT, you see it will be displayed right below here. So once it's been displayed, we come and click on the button there, and then we come say continue. So it's going to list the different projects from EU. So the first one that we had there, which is the Youth Rising, you will see it selected at the top there. So once it's selected, we come and say continue with selection. So with that, it will bring you here. So basically, what information do we get from IRT? We normally get the disbursement information from IRT. So here we are with two systems being displayed. The Liberia project dashboard and the IRT system. If you look up there, you see IRT. So that's the information we have in IRT for that project. And so if you look below here, you see the dashboard. So these are the two informations that we have. So we're going to look at these two information and compare them and see which one we think is okay. Then we link it to use it for that purpose. So if we look here, we see commitment. Now, commitment normally is the project cost. So the project cost we see here. So if you look on the side here, you see dashboard and IRT. So the one you see now is the information we have for the project, the commitment information from our dashboard. So if we think the information in the dashboard for the disbursement, for the commitment project is okay, we're going to leave it that way. Then we come to disbursement. Now, if you look to the end there, you see IRT. So just go and click on dashboard and let's see something. Okay. Yeah. Go back to IRT. Sorry. Okay. So this is the disbursement information in the IRT system. And then we have the dashboard body now. Since we don't want to use the disbursement information from the Liberia project dashboard, we're going to take the IRT body up there. So once we take the IRT body, then that means all disbursement information from IRT for that particular project will be filtered to our system. So once that is done, we'll go down here and click on input. Now for projection, we don't normally take projection from the IRT system because not all of the development partners will send projection information. So we only concerned about disbursement information. So once we capture the disbursement information, we tell the system, say, take all disbursement information from IRT, which we've done. You come down here and say input. So once that is done, you see here now connected to IRT. So every disbursement information for that particular project We don't have to go to development partner for it. We filter from IIT straight to our system. So that's how the connection works. Okay,
maybe I'll just say a couple of other things. So I think this is in the case of the EU, right? So for the EU, because of the way the data is published and because of some issues which we're talking with the EU about as well, we can take the disbursement data and that's great. And the good thing about the disbursement data is that then it's completely up to date. If we go to look at this project, we should have gone down actually beforehand to show this. But before it was like 77% dispersed. And now pulling all the data in from IIT, it's 100% dispersed. It's actually slightly over, but that's because of currency exchange rates changes in euros to US dollars. So the good thing is this, then we have all the disbursement data in, and you can see we've got it for the full lifetime of the project as well, just by clicking imports and updating it as well. In the case of the EU at the moment, it's tricky to import the commitments and the MTEF projections, which is from the budget data field for IT people. But for other development partners, for the African Development Bank, for example, we're importing commitments, disbursements, and MTEF projections. It just depends on what the development partner has made available. But I think even for the EU, just pulling in the disbursements data only, this is a massive time saving and it's a massive improvement in the quality of data. Because if you think about the EMCU having to go and collect this data from the development partner every quarter and to ask them for the many different projects that the EU is working in, I think it's like hundreds, Nathan, no? It's hundreds of projects, and for the EU to provide that information and then someone, either Nathan or his colleague Momo, to enter this information into the system, that's a lot of work. And that presents an opportunity also for keying errors and mistakes and this kind of thing as well. So this is a massive time saving instead of having to do this every single quarter, once you've done it, once you've linked the project, now every night, the data will be kept up to date automatically as well. Yeah. Maybe I'll just show the edit interface also. Maybe just because when I was speaking to a couple of other people for the last couple of days, they asked how else can you enter data into the dashboard, right? So again, because we have to continue entering some data manually, either in this case, MTEF projections, or in the case of other development partners, all their data if they're not publishing. I'll just show you how you can do that. So the one way is that you can go into each project. It's got this pretty simple interface, I think it's hopefully quite clear what everything is, but we've got some little descriptions and things of fields where we thought maybe it wasn't quite so clear. You can go to finances, and then in this case, you can't update the disbursements because now we've decided to just take that data from IIT, but you can update the commitments, for example, or you can update the MTEF projections, which is from the budget element in IIT. So you can just go and enter it and update it yourself. It's the test site. So let's say we want to add a new commitment. Let's make it $1 million, and it's already saved. So we don't have to worry about losing the data. So this is one way you can keep it up to date. And the second way then is also, if you go to the export data tab. So we know, I think this is something that came up in a previous session, or maybe it was a bilateral conversation. Someone was telling me, the challenge of when you don't have internet access or when the electricity goes out, for example. It's still, and this is something that we really worked hard on also in Liberia to be able to still collect that kind of data and keep the system up to date. So on the left-hand side, you can download a template for your particular development partner. You can download it in a particular currency as well. So let's say we want it for Sweden and we want it in Swedish krona. And the reason for this is because development partners often send the data back in their own currency and not in US dollars, for example. We can download the template, and then I won't go through the whole process, but you get an Excel file back. You can upload, I can just show you the file. You get this Excel file. And then you can go and update every project. So if you have, all the disbursement data on your computer, for example, you can go through and add the disbursement amounts for every single project without having to go through each project individually. And then you can just upload that file once back into the system and it updates everything. So there's a few different ways you can keep it up to date. We try to keep it as simple as possible.
So the system, like we said, is user-friendly. It's very fast and easy to work with. You don't have to be looking around, what should I do with this and that. Now, because every system must be user-friendly, so you can be able to work with it easily. So the first thing we have to say, the system is fast and user-friendly. It has a fast and user-friendly interface. We upload data to the system using Excel, like what Mark was showing you. So once we put the information in, we don't have to go key in those information in the system manually. We just use our field and then upload the Excel sheet back to the system. So the system also has a monitoring field that we can use to monitor to track the disbursement information for a particular project. So like we said, we can also use IRT to connect to the system. So those are basic features of the Liberia project's dashboard.
We just wanted to pull this up because this is the IT acquire statement that the colleague from the European Commission referred to, I think, in his remarks yesterday, right? Yeah, yesterday. And one of the main drivers of this was around development effectiveness, right? So this is where we came from as an initiative, and this is where we want to focus on again once we've got some of this data collection issues resolved.
I'm going to ask a question. Why do we want to use the IRT data for our system? Now, one point we say the IRT data has an improved data quality. So every information we get from the IRT system for a particular project is detailed. So we get all the basic information for that particular project. Once the project is linked to the IRT system, every information from there is detailed. Then the next thing is the IRT system has a currency conversion. Now we face a lot of issue with this currency conversion. Let's take, for instance, European Union. Now, European Union normally send the information to us in euros. And so when we use the conversion rate, they will not agree with the kind of conversion rate that we use. So since the information is from IRT, IRT will do the conversion for us automatically. So we don't have to face any problem with, oh, this conversion rate is not it. We don't want this conversion rate, the money used, blah, blah. So all of that has been canceled because we are now using the IRT data. Then the next thing is it reduces the burden of data collection. Now, like we said here, once we connect the disbursement information from our system to IRT, we don't have to go running beyond development partners for information. Every disbursement information for that particular project automatically feeds to our system. So that's one good thing. Then another thing is we overcoming the issue of donor responsiveness. Like I said, donors have different systems that will have to go to pick all of this information. And at the time it would take them to get all of this information and send it to us, there are a lot of delay. So the IRT system has now reduced all of that. Then the next thing is clear process of reconciliation. The last one there is overcoming manual data entry challenges. Now, let's take, for instance, European Union. European Union has almost like 100 plus projects. It would take me a lot of time to enter these information manually, one at a time, right? It would take me a lot of time. But once the project is linked to IRT system from our system, we don't have to go through this. Every information from IRT automatically filtered for that particular project. Then the last one is to discover new activities. Is it happening now? Okay, so this is what we're trying to make sure happen. Every time there's a new project for a particular DB that we are working with that is connected to IRT, we hope that every new information for that DB from IRT will automatically come to us. I don't know if that can work. Okay, so we hope that happens. So once it happens, it will be very good for us. We'll be very happy.
So just quickly, like how we approach trying to use IRT data. So lots of the efforts in the past, I think, around using IRT data have kind of come at things, I think, from a little bit the wrong perspective of thinking, how can we just get IRT data into the system? And so I think we came from the perspective of thinking, well, why would we want to? And how is that going to help things? So that's the reason why we thought about having these kind of ideas of improving quality, reducing burden, and then discovering new activities as well. So that leads us to a kind of particular strategy in terms of how to get the data into the system. First of all, we want to prioritize because we know we're going to have to do quite a bit of work, working with individual development partners to make sure their data is in shape. So we wanted to work with the largest development partners. And so far we're working with those that represent about 75% of the spend in Liberia, which is, if we got those partners working well, then we're already on a really good track. Secondly, and that's both because of the value, but also because sometimes those development partners have lots of very small projects as well. So this applies, I think, both for USAID and for the EU. It's a lot of effort to try to collect that data. So if we can automate most of that, then we're going to save a lot of time that we can spend on other things. Secondly, then validating, and this means talking to the country office from the DP, seeing if the data that's in IATI actually makes sense to them, if they can kind of see their own projects and it looks okay for them. And then also with those in headquarters responsible for publication. On this, I just want to say again, I think we've said thanks. We'll probably say thanks many times in the presentation, but we're really grateful for those people in development partners at headquarters who have been working with us on the data as well. I think once we've got the data working well in Liberia, we're going to make it also so that it's going to be useful in lots of other countries as well. So I think it's a really good investment of time, but we're also really grateful just for helping Liberia specifically as well. And then finally, there's the actual technical work. But this is kind of the less important thing. That's stuff that we can sort out, but we need to get these other things clear first.
So progress we've made so far. So currently we have like 3 development partners that we've able to link from our system with IATI. We are still working on how best to link these other systems like Sweden, UK, USAID. We're still trying to see how best we can link their projects to our system. But so far, this is how far we've gone with linking projects. So we already did this in the live view. So this was done in live view, so there's no need we do this again. So we did this. So we just move on. Now the IATI data store. This is normally where we get all of the information that we link to our system from. Now, what do we use the IATI data store? The IATI data store is accurate. Information from this particular system is accurate. And another thing is that after every 30 hours, we know that every information that thing is updated. So that's why we always want to use this particular IATI data store to link all of our projects. So once we use this, we know that every information we get from IATI will be very much accurate. Now, meeting our objectives. What have we done so far since we've started linking the projects from our system with IATI? What has happened? So one, we say we've improved data quality. We've avoided key errors. Now, normally when you enter in the information manually, there are a whole lot of errors you will make. You're a human being, every human being makes mistake. So when you just try to key information in manually, you got like 100 projects to key in manually, you would make mistake. So by linking information from our system with IATI, we've stopped that. We don't make mistake with data anymore when it comes to that. So that's why it's handling currency conversion. I think we did this. Yeah, we did this. Okay, so that's how data appears in our system once it's not linked with IATI yet. Now, this is the Liberia project dashboard. And this is a sample of the African Development Bank project, one of the projects. Now, this project has a grant and loan component. So once we capture this particular project in our system, this is how it will appear. But when it's linked to IATI, now let's see the differences between them. So once it's linked to IATI, it will give you the option now. One project will come, giving you the option to choose whether that particular project you want to see the grant component or the loan component. So that's how it appears in IATI in our system. So with our system not being linked to IATI, it comes like this. But once the project is linked to IATI, Then you have it this way.
So I think I need to reinstall my PowerPoint or something. So then the question is, this is the last bit of the presentation. So after we've done all this work with collecting all this data, with trying to make that much easier, simplifying data collection process and stuff, it means that we can actually turn back to the real issues we want to solve. And I think a lot of the time, we're focused a lot on aid information, but we want to collect aid information for management, right? And we have aid management units, we want to allow them to be able to do management and coordination work. So here's a series of things that we think we want to start doing with this data. And we'd be interested, people can ask any questions they want to, obviously, after this, but we're also really interested to hear also from other partner countries and those who are working at country level, whether these are the sorts of correct issues that we should be thinking about and trying to solve also. So first of all, looking at counterpart funding, our government and donor contributions well aligned. And this means, the government knowing at the right point in time what's expected from development partners in terms of contributions. This is a picture of a road in the northwest of the country, the Bangasalier Road.
It's Lofa.
Oh, it goes into Lofa, no?
So now this road is a road that leads to one of the commercial counties in Liberia. Now the road here is called the Lofa Road. At a certain point in time, this road used to be very deplorable. It would take you like 30 days to reach to Lofa. But now since the road has been developed, it takes you 1 day to reach. So that's how bad our road has been. So with this now, with the development partner intervention, we see that we're now seeing the value for money. Yeah.
And the challenge here was at some point getting the RAP payments basically made in time, which is making, resettling people in order to make space for the road to be constructed. So there's a need to have donor or development partner and government contributions well aligned also here. So issues around coordination. So this was the Phoebe hospital we went to last year. And there were issues here around the hospital having lots of very expensive medications, disease-specific medication, but they didn't have more routine medication they needed as well. So this is also a question of making sure that, when the generous donor contributions are coming forward, that they're well aligned also with contributions on the government side. All of those gaps can also be properly addressed as well.
Another issue that we also had with this was, we see that development partners were only focusing on emergency cases. Let's take, for instance, COVID-19. Now, they will spend all of the heavy money behind COVID-19. What happens to all the other local sicknesses that attack people for which they go to hospital? Malaria, who, whatever it is, those local sicknesses. Now, they were not looking at that. They were only focusing on the heavy emergency cases. What happens to the other local cases? So it's always good that the government agenda is always aligned with the development partner agenda. Once they are not aligned, you also face problem in that.
We talked about this issue, I think, of resource mobilization as well. And this is particularly when there is when a development partner has committed maybe to providing, let's say, $100 million over 5 years, and maybe half of it has been used so far. If the government can see those facts, then maybe it can go back to the development partner and ask if the remaining contributions that are outstanding could be allocated in ways that are going to be useful according to the government and according to the National Development Plan. So there's a big issue around sustainability, and this happens in many cases, right? So, the end of a donor finance projects, and especially if it's maybe going to an NGO or something, it might not be well known to the government, and therefore the project at the end of the donor financing, it might be discontinued, and that knowledge and everything might be lost. This one. So then obviously there's a big issue around making sure projects are actually aligned to the National Development Plan, and they're projects of the government and that are actually in the National Development Agenda as well. So we have some summary stuff on this already. You can see by the Pro Agenda for Prosperity and Development, which is the Liberian National Development Plan. You can see the amount at the high level. What we're also starting to look at is the amount at the indicator level as well. So the indicators can actually also be mapped to the SDGs, but this then allows us maybe over time well, we'll see how soon, sometimes these things take time, but to start to marry up inputs with outputs as well. So if we're seeing that we're not getting progress in certain indicators or in certain parts of the PAPD, is that because we're missing money? For example, we need to put more funding in to particular sectors or particular indicators. Finally, results. You want to do this one?
So once projects are ongoing, we also take the time to go on the field to do monitoring. And it's always good to do monitoring because most of the DPs will come and say, we are doing this particular project on this side, we're doing this one on this side. You will see that you have like 2 or 3 DPs will come and say, we're doing on a particular side, they say they are doing a project there. So it's always good to go on the field to do monitoring. I remember a point in time we went with the minister, right? When we want to do the high fee visitation. So now, once you go there, you monitor the area and see the work that is ongoing there. Once it's not okay, you can take that time to meet with the DBs and then sit down, talk to them. Okay, this particular project you see carry on this side, blah, blah, it's not going well. So let us see how best we can work on it and make that thing work out well. So it's always good to go on the field to do monitoring or to visit the areas that the DBs are working to see what's happening there. So once everything is okay, then we're good.
So this, and just to give you an example of some of the stuff we got on the dashboard, I was also talking with another colleague this morning or earlier today about what we can start to do with results data. So we can do some stuff already with looking at the financials. So if we can see that a project has stopped dispersing and we know that the data is good, that can then start to pinpoint some areas where we might want to start looking more. So I think last time I was in Liberia, I was also discussing with a colleague the idea of having kind of like red flags for projects that you can then start to say, well, we should start to investigate here or here. But we can maybe also start doing this with some results data where we have it available. And one idea was that we can start to compare the actuals with the targets. And this, it depends on the availability of data, like how much this might work. But to start to see, not just at the project level, but maybe by ministry or by implementing partner, where we seem to be having issues with maybe project delivery as well, so that we can get more, we can unlock kind of disbursement challenges as well, but also we can raise the quality of projects as well. So these are the kind of thoughts we had in terms of, what we might want to do with this data going forward, shifting the conversation from just collection and aid information and data towards back to development effectiveness. But we'd really interested in hearing your thoughts, whether these are the right challenges, whether you think this is interesting and useful, and especially in terms of your country context as well. So thank you very much. Or any questions, please.
No, thank you very much. First of all, excellent presentation, very impressive tool. So congratulations on the great work that have been done. 2 questions. One is actually a repeat probably of the question from a colleague from Colombia is, how do you ensure that the data is not duplicated? For example, if you upload the data from USAID and then you upload the data from UNFPA, most likely you will get the same data for the projects that are funded by USAID with the funding going to UNFPA. So this is question number 1. And then the question number 2 is, whenever you upload the data from IATI, if you do any manipulations for the purpose of data cleanliness or for the purpose of integration, and in case if you do, then how do you ensure, do you have to do those manipulations every time when you refresh IATI data, which probably, I don't know how frequently you do that, but if you do have to do those manipulations, then I would imagine it's actually quite a lot of work if you have to repeat the same thing over and over. Over, thank you.
So the first question, double counting. The answer to this is, we first wanted to get we had lots of conversations about double counting and about the issue of double counting. And we had lots of priorities and lots of issues we wanted to fix in the system and improve and stuff going forward. I think my perspective was we want to be able to at least collect everything once. That's the first priority, right? And sometimes I think with double counting, it can get quite complicated and you can start getting kind of really focused on edge cases and unusual sort of examples. And then you kind of lose sight of the objective a little bit. So to start with, there's an easy way of solving this, which is you collect data from one of those projects and not the other. So you collect maybe the donor contribution or maybe, for example, the World Bank project and not separately the donor contributions to that. But now that we're starting to get much better data into the system as well, we can start to, it really does make sense to start to address that issue. So for solving that issue, I think we can look to IATI. I mean, a lot of the system is sort of built with sort of IATI as the logical model, I guess, of how to do a lot of these things. And in IATI, there were ways of solving this, which is basically saying you have incoming funds. And what you would do then is, for example, there's a World Bank project, the SECRAM project, a thing in like Southeast Liberia that has like a UK contribution to it as well. It's like a $6 million UK contribution and like hundreds of millions of dollars World Bank project. And so on the World Bank project, you can just show the disbursements from out of the project, and we're getting that again from client connections, so we know that data is really good. And in the dashboard going forward, we can then add in an incoming contribution from the development partner as well. So on the project, then you would just see the hundreds of millions of dollars. It would look correct. But then when you add everything up, you basically subtract incoming funds for that donor from the total disbursements. So I think that's the way that you solve it in a simple way without getting like too complicated and stuff. And you can do that also. We had some conversations also, I think yesterday or maybe with a colleague from South America around what would you do also with more complicated projects. And I think also with more complicated projects, you can take actually a slightly similar approach. So for example, if you have a development partner that's collecting lots of contributions into a pooled fund, you can create a project just for that, saying all the funding coming in, and then you create a new project for each of the projects going out of it. So you can keep these kinds of things simple without getting like super complicated, because I mean, again, that's one of the big lessons that we've got from previous systems. We need to keep everything as simple as possible. Otherwise, it's going to get super confusing to keep it going, and it's not going to be sustainable. Secondly, upload from IATI, everything is automated. So yes, we do have manipulation of the data from IATI. There are some cases where, we've tried to be pragmatic, in terms of wanting to get data into the system now at this point. And even though we've asked for some improvements from certain development partners as well, we're not waiting always until they're done. We might be, implementing workarounds to make it possible to import that data. So, but all those routines are automated, so we don't have to do it again. All that work, it's automated. Thank you. Chimvana?
Thanks, and thanks for the interesting presentation. I want to understand your sustainability plans, because most of the times these projects are rarely sustained by civil servants. In case you're out of the project, will my colleague from the government side be able to manage and maintain the system? What are the sustainability plans on the ground?
So, the government of Liberia is trying to make sure that they train somebody who's going to replace Mark, just in case Mark is not around. But we're still in the process of training the person. So Mark was even involved. He talked to somebody from Liberia, and they are in the process of working on it. So that's how far we got.
Just to add to this, so the day-to-day management of the system, I don't do anything. This is all Nathan. So I'm not entering any information into the system. I'm not doing any coding of the recoding of projects. I'm not changing, if there's new codes that need to be added or changed. You can do all this through the user interface, and that's something all stuff that Nathan does. So what I do is a software development. And in response to the question of sustainability, it's difficult and it's complicated. I think the issue is that from my perspective, and we thought about this a lot, in the last year or so, how can we make this sustainable? we did think a lot about if we could transfer the programming skills to someone inside government. I just don't think that's realistic. You know, there aren't sufficient programmers actually working inside government, and if you were to train them up to a pretty high level, to be able to kind of make changes and improvements to the system going forward, then they would be poached by the private sector. So it doesn't really make sense to do that anyway, right? The second idea then is instead to basically share the resources with other countries as well. And so this is what we're also interested in doing. So if it might be the case that Liberia is able to pay for this, or its development partners to pay for improvements to the system for a period of time, and another country maybe is also working on this but can't support that at the same time, then we can sort of balance out those contributions as well. So we can make sure that things are still running. And even if then the improvements, sorry, what I want to say is, in terms of the continued development of the system, I think it's really important. It's important for fixing bugs and those kinds of issues which come up, and other sort of minor changes like that, and security issues, that kind of thing. But it's also really important in terms of making sure that the system continues to evolve with the policy context. So that if your deputy minister or the minister or the president asks for something else to be shown or included in the system, that you can actually respond. And if you don't do that, I think that's one of the reasons why lots of these other systems have not been sustained, because they stop being relevant. So I think this is the sort of idea in terms of sustainability. I'm happy to talk about that kind of model a bit more. But we can also flesh that out kind of on a bilateral and a multilateral basis, how we make that work. That's the answer. Michelle.
How, excuse me, you mentioned early on that you had to find a way to take IATI data and make it relevant for the context of the Liberian government and coding it to sort of the code lists that the government uses. How difficult was that? And if you're saying that there are other governments that could potentially join, you start to say, okay, well, how hard was it to map like OECD DAC sectors to the sectors the Liberian government uses? And how different would be the sectors that the Liberian government uses from Cameroon or Niger? And is that a minor part of the process, or is that an area where if you just get those code lists aligned with each government, you're ready to roll?
So as we said in the presentation, the focus to start with has been on the financial data. And the reason for that has been because, if we want to improve the quality of the data and reduce the burden of data collection, that's where it really made sense for us to start. But the third point that we put on there, and Nathan said to me, hey, we're doing this yet? And I was like, we're working on this still, is importing new projects. And again, we want to do this carefully and thoughtfully. But that's the point where you start to then import the coding. It's not that complicated a piece of work. So I think Edward's, I don't know if Edward's here. Edward was talking about the fact that in the Ghanaian system, they use OECD codes, and you could use them in the system. We actually also have a field in the system, but we don't use it because it hasn't really been needed. But the idea would be essentially to map from the OECD codes to the local sector codes, and it's not a complicated piece of work. I think Johanna and I did something like this, working on improving the OECD codes. Maybe it was, I don't know, like 7-8 years ago now, but we did it for a bunch of countries. The result of that work was to prove that methodology was possible. You can do these mapping tables if you have the codes to be sufficiently granular, which is why we then went to the OECD and got some new codes added to make them granular enough. And once you've got that in there, then you can do all this mapping, these mapping tables. And basically it's like a big Excel spreadsheet where you've got the code and then you map to the local classification. So yeah, it's doable. Yeah, and it will be, you'd have a mapping table for each country because each country is different. So Wolfgang, can you speak into the microphone? Sorry, thank you.
It's a little bit different question because I was playing around on the dashboard while you were talking. I see that you're tracking SDG contributions and in the dashboard, and I would be interested how you have mapped the the sectors and themes to the SDG, because that's something that's quite complicated for us. And also, I've noticed that looking at disbursements shows that, you know, the bank hasn't made any contribution to climate change in certain years, because we're looking at disbursements and not at the overall picture in that sense. So I'm wondering how if you will work on that, or if this is the final. But I'm really interested in the methodology, because we are trying to solve it too.
Now, mapping projects with the SDG goals has been a serious issue. Because if you look at, there are certain projects that will have like more than one SDG goal. So our system is built in a way that it only captures one SDG goal. So it has been a serious issue. Mark and myself, we took like over 2 days. We tried to map the project, but it has been a serious issue. But we're still working on it. We'll see how best we can try to see, to get more than one SDG goal for a project in the system, so that we can be able to map all of that. But we're still trying to work on it.
I mean, so just to expand on that a little bit. So the methodology was basically reviewing project titles, descriptions, and the sector coding that we'd already used in the dashboard, and going through and seeing basically which SDG made the most sense. And the system does actually have the possibility of capturing multiple SDGs and multiple different sectors, all this kind of thing. We haven't enabled that because it gets really complicated in terms of trying to keep the data up to date then. You know, if you think about having a spreadsheet, and then once you start to have multiple values in any column, it becomes really difficult to keep that up to date. So that kind of stuff is possible, but I think it only really makes sense to try to do that kind of thing with multiple SDGs and stuff if we're importing the data from IATI, because then we don't have to have, you know, a really complicated user face or really complicated spreadsheets where you're typing in multiple things in each cell, and then you're getting like it's getting in a mess. So the idea is it's a bit blunt, definitely, to just, you know, insist on only one, but it's much better than the data getting really complicated and messy. So that's the approach that we took. Makes sense now. Henrietta?
I have a question which relates especially to the UN system. And in the UN system, we had a funding compact agreed with the member states, asking basically contributors to give more core funding and less tightly earmarked money. So, and then give more visibility to core funders also at the country level. So my question, I just was looking at the OECD data or UN outflows, core funding, Liberia 2021, 47 million. Is this type of information also available in your project dashboard of like, what's the flexibility of the money that is funding those projects? Because like if for the UN it's core funding and the government says, well, we don't need it here, we need it somewhere else, you could easily shift the money around. Where if it's multi-B funding where the UK gives money to UNFPA for a very specific project, there's nothing else you can do apart from going back to the UK and the whole the negotiations. So just want to say, like, the flexibility of the source of funding for the projects, is that captured in the system?
Yes, I think so. I mean, in the sense that we're capturing the 8 types of the project according to OECD DAC definitions, and that has something on flexibility. Those can be quite granular and not terribly always terribly intuitive in terms of the implications for earmarking. But I have just done a piece of work mapping those across as well. A lot of what we've done in the dashboard is kind of like simplifying things, like where you have many different types of loans, you know, in the OECD system. We kind of just want to say loan, you know, often, and similarly with maybe this kind of thing as well. So maybe what's particularly interesting is, yeah, we want to know the modality in terms of its project, TA, or if it's budget support, for example. But then maybe we want to be able to say from that if it's how earmarked it is as well. But that makes me think also in terms of these use cases we talked about, that would be a nice one to be able to summarize. You know, these are the agreements that seem to be sort of flexible under flexible financing. And so that then if there may be issues with those particular activities, or if they're not aligned to the government's national development plan, then that's something that policymakers could take up with the relevant development partners. So that's an interesting idea as well. Thank you. Sarah?
Just a quick comment. Thank you for the presentation. I think that I just wanted to share a little bit from the EADI perspective because, Mark shared a slide early in the presentation about, how a lot of aims have failed. And I think that EADI's initiative for a long time focused on integrating with aims, right? And most of those integrations didn't actually work. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which we don't have time to discuss now. But I think that, this presentation kind of demonstrates the effort required to kind of figure out how to make this work. And I think there's a lot for EADI to learn from this effort and this example of what is actually required, to be able to pull EADI data into country systems so that governments can actually use it. So this is a broader discussion in the EADI community and broader work we're doing, because there's still a lot of interest, certainly from governments to integrate EADI data in country systems, but it hasn't been easy and it hasn't worked as it was originally intended. So, it's great to see this example. And I hope that we can continue learning from the work that they're doing in Liberia.
Visits, please.
Hi, thank you. First of all, excellent presentation, and thank you for sharing this excellent project. My question has less to do with the data and more about the system security. So as cyber attack become more and more common these days, and I know that it's the baseline consideration of any project being built, as a system could be considered, and as the current best practice, this particular system could be considered as best practice for any country who would like to develop an aims right now. I would like to ask you, are you able to share to us the cybersecurity standard that you have adopted for this system? And if there is any difficulty maintaining it for, say, any organization in partner countries with a limited fund? Thank you very much.
A question about security. So, I think there are different ways of thinking about security, right? And in terms of this system is not an IFMIS, right? So the level of security that you would want in an IFMIS and to lock down that system and to prevent that from other kind of intrusion and stuff is different from this kind of system, right? Because this is not, you're not spending any money from this. It's a reporting system, right? You're collecting information together. Yes, we do have lots of security on the server itself, but what we also have is backups, so if there were any issue, and this has happened before with previous system, it's super easy to back up the system. And that happens regularly as well, I think every night. And in that case, then if anything does happen, of course you want to prevent things going down. It hasn't gone down, in the 4 years that we've been running, it's been, up like 99.9, almost averages out like 100% of the time, so I don't think there's, I don't think that's never been an issue that we've had to face, but that's also because we have regular backups of the software anyway. And we're also not really collecting any personal data in the system as well, right? We have people's usernames and email addresses, but that's it. Obviously, all passwords are encrypted as well, so those can't be stolen. So those sorts of security issues, I think we have enough things in place that's fine. So in terms of at the country level, if you wanted to install this yourself, you can use whatever IT, best practices you have in your country according to your own policies and regulations, and that's fine. And I think it's good to take regular backups. If you can set that up as well, it should be easy to do anyway. It's very easy to back up the database, then that would be the way that I would handle that as well. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, so we are running a bit over, so I just wanted to say, can I take one more question? Yeah, from the Francophone, please. Yeah, this is the final question, so please go ahead, yes.
Je reviens au casque. Alors, merci pour cet excellent travail. Alors, merci beaucoup pour cet excellent travail. Alors, j'ai deux questions, rapidement. La première, c'est les données historiques. Est-ce que votre système tient compte des données historiques du Liberia? Est-ce qu'il y a des données de base? Est-ce qu'il y a des données, il y a une année de référence? Ma deuxième question, je n'ai pas vu dans le commentaire la partie analytique du logiciel. Alors qu'une base de données sert à prendre des décisions, sert à prendre des bonnes orientations. Des indicateurs financiers comme le taux d'absorption, les indicateurs sociaux, les indicateurs économiques, je n'ai pas vu, alors que l'important, c'est vraiment d'arriver à cela. Merci.
So with regards to the history data, now the system has a point where you choose whether that project is ongoing or completed. So once the project is ongoing, you choose ongoing. And completed projects, they are still in the system. So we're doing analysis, we filter for only ongoing projects and keep those completed projects behind. But they are still in the system, we don't trash them.
One other thing that's useful on this in terms of historical data as well, you know, there's been a lot of work, right, in the last year or so to go back and review all the projects in the system, and that includes looking back over a number of years and going back to development partners where you know there's maybe gaps and things, and asking them in a manual data kind of request to update that data. It's a lot of work and it's a bit unrealistic, you know, to get that kind of level of attention and detail from development partners. So when we pull the data in from IATI, you know, if we link particular projects up from IATI, we get the full historical record of the project as well. So we don't need to then go back and ask for the quotas to be updated because we can see that it's all complete. And that has been a really nice thing of putting the data in for AFDB and the World Bank, that we get not just kind of the current data up to date, but also the stuff beforehand as well. So I think for me, yes, of course, you can put any data into the system that you want to, and you can type it in or you can upload it via spreadsheet if you wish. But if you put it in from IATI, it makes much more sense because you're asking for a lot less work from everybody else. It's kind of more reasonable. The second thing in terms of the analytics, so yeah, there are some other dashboards and things here that we already have on here. So we have, maybe need to think about the language. It's like dashboards on a dashboard, whatever, you know, it's a name at least. So you can see by donor, by sector, by SDG. So these are the national budget sectors by PAPD pillar. These were the sort of visualizations that we wanted to have to start with. This is pretty high level. It's pretty simple, but it's also useful, you know. And then you can see how that's changed over time. This is for all sectors, but we can say we want to see in education. And you can see this breakdown over time. So the question you asked, though, I think was more like around socioeconomic data and stuff like this. There's two things I wanted to say. These are things we're working on still. In terms of the maps, we were talking also the last few days. You can see the map on the front page. It's got lots of pins. It would be helpful to have more like heat maps and things like this, and that you could then overlay also maybe some of the socioeconomic data. But the second thing is what we're also looking at is, I think I mentioned the National Development Plan indicators as well. And this is where we want to try to get some of that data from as well. That's complicated because of, you know, the challenges of collecting that data at country level and the challenges then of kind of putting it together, you know, in any sort of large organization, and especially a government, it's tricky. But those are all things that we can develop and we can add into the system, you know, but we wanted to start with the most important functionality before trying to do everything. We want to get the basics working well first. So that was our kind of idea. But yeah, it's definitely something we want to do. Okay, I'm going to stop. Thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, just to say again, if anyone wants to have a demo, you know, to look at this in more detail, of course you can go on the site yourself. But I'm also happy to sit down with anybody as well. And the second thing is also, if you have, if you would like to see what your own data from your country would look like in the dashboards, then talk to me as well. And I can do this for free. Also, I can put your data in and I can show you what the dashboard would look like for your own country as well. If that's something that'll be interesting, we can have a go at that as well. So please come and speak to me. So